Welcome, everybody. The International Parking and Mobility Institute presents today's Shop Talk, Planning for What's Next, Roadmap to Recovery for the Parking, Mobility, and Transportation. My name is Justin, and I will be assisting Carmen, Donnell, CAPP, in moderating today's Shop Talk. As a reminder, today's Shop Talk is being recorded. We will make the recording available online once and we'll post it to IPMI's YouTube channel. Before I turn it over to Carmen, I want to go over a few quick housekeeping rules for today. If you have a webcam and you're comfortable doing so, please turn on your camera. IPMI wants everyone to feel engaged and participate, and we want to see your smiling faces. We want this virtual Shop Talk to be just like a regular Shop Talk, face-to-face and sharing our ideas. As a reminder, all participants' lines are muted. We invite everyone to participate. To do so, we ask everyone to use the raise your hand feature. For online participants, please click on the participants icon in the Zoom control menu. A separate window will pop up. The raise your hand option will appear at the bottom of your participants menu. Once you raise your hand, we will recognize you and unmute your line. Phone participants can use *9 to raise your hand and press *6 to unmute your line. Once recognized, your microphone will be unmuted and allowed to join the conversation. Please say your name and your organization so that way everyone knows who you are. You may also type your question in the chat. Click the chat icon and type your question or comment and click send. I will read these later to the group. And now I'm going to turn the audience over to Carmen.
Thanks so much, Justin. Thanks, Rachel, and all of IPMI for inviting me to be your moderator today. This is very exciting for me. As a brief introduction to myself, Carmen Donnell, as Justin already introduced me, I work for PayByPhone, have been with PayByPhone for about 1.5 years now. In the parking industry, however, going on my 13th year. Very pleased to be grouped with all of the lovely parking professionals that we have on the call today. My role at PayByPhone is VP of Sales for the West Coast. So pretty much everything west of the Mississippi, both in Canada, yes, that's part of North America, and the United States is my responsibility. So we have a number of different topics that I'd like for us to explore today. For the most part, I would mostly just be teeing it up, maybe with a couple of points, and then opening it up to the audience. I might call on a few of you specifically. If you hear your name, I'd love you to chime in. If you don't want to, that's fine as well. Quickly, Rachel, you'd put up on the chat for people to rename themselves. I don't know if you want to give instructions on how to do that because I see a heck of a lot of Justins and I won't be able to call people by their name if I don't know them.
We have a proliferation of Justins, and
we do.
So I believe if you go into the participant list and you right click on your name, or there is a more button, you can rename yourself, be as creative as you like, or go with what your parents gave you. But it'll be helpful to us if we can find the real Justin today. So if you have a challenge with it, don't worry about it. If you put a chat and say, you know, I'm really this person, but go ahead and feel free to do that.
Thanks. And apparently Josh wants to go incognito. I know what you look like though, so I'll know you by name. All right, so thank you again for all joining. One of the topics that came up was, and the fact that this conversation is about recovery, so obviously pandemic recovery is top of mind. One of the things that came up was asking me specifically from PayByPhone's perspective what the data is telling us in terms of recovery. So Justin, if you want to launch, I've put together just a few slides and then we'll come back into this format where we can see everybody's faces. This is data as of the end of July. So I'm getting a report monthly from my data analytics and finance team where we're able to see what PayByPhone's projection was for transactions. Don't worry, this is not a PayByPhone sales pitch at all. It's just simply looking at transactional data, and most of our parking is transient short-term parking on and off street. So we obviously had projections for this year of what we were hoping to hit. And this pandemic really affected our business just like it's affected everybody's business and organization. But we're seeing some really, really great recovery stories from the data. So I wanted to take the first few minutes and go over a few of these slides that will show different markets, IPMI being an international organization. PayByPhone gets some international data. So this first slide, I'll just explain what the different markings are. The blue marking is where we had projected to be for this year. So 2020 target. 2019 data is what happened last year, so it's kind of faded out there. And the green is actually what is happening. So you can see obviously in March, everybody took a nosedive in terms of transactions. But starting in about mid to early May, we have started to see some really, really strong growth in all of our markets. This one particularly looks at global. It doesn't tell an accurate story, and I'll explain why in a minute. But if you want to move on to the next one, we'll look at Canada and US specifically first, as those are probably top of mind. And so here we are at the end of July, and in Canada, I live in Canada, sorry, I live in Vancouver, British Columbia, for those that don't know. We fortunately have not been hit as hard as some of the other parts of the world, and knock on wood, I'm hoping that we can keep it that way. But our recovery now is almost at 80% of what paid parking transactional information used to be, which is, I think, phenomenal. And when we're looking at our projection now, so we take the last 7 days worth of data and we build that red line out every month. It changes a little bit. You can see that by the time that we get to, it's about early December, we're expecting to be back at 100%, and from there, hopefully growth. So let's look at US. The story's not quite as great in the US. Some of your markets have been hit more hard than ours in some of the different geographical areas, but you're already tracking, US is already tracking at about 60%. What's interesting is that your uphill growth is much faster than Canada, and it looks like you might, if this projection continues, hit 100% and greater, even up to 110 or 120% by October, November timeframe. So this is painting a really great story. Hopefully we won't have any backsliding with shutdowns and that type of thing again. The next slide is going to talk about UK. So as we know, when we look at parking environments and technology and adoption of parking technology, we often look to our European markets to see what's going to happen over here. And I think the same can be said for the pandemic recovery. So they're already tracking over 80%. They're one of our strongest markets right now in the UK, and their projections are potentially recovering as soon as next month or the month after. The next slide is Paris or France. I say Paris specifically because it contributes a lot to what's going on with the data here. This data is all over the place. It's quite chaotic, but I can explain to you what's going on. Paris is an interesting city where in the summer, all of the residents leave. People don't like to stay in Paris in the summer. I don't know why. I'd love to go to Paris right now. I'd love to go anywhere right now, but I'd love to go to Paris, summer or anytime. But they actually end up leaving and going into the small little touristy towns, and a lot of those touristy towns don't have paid parking. So of course, we're not tracking parking transactions in the same way. And in Paris right now, it's generally just tourists that will come in. Oftentimes they're using Uber and Lyft or other types of mobility, and so they're not actually parking. So although the 7-day prediction is showing that Paris is going to be down to 0% transactions by September, this is not accurate. This is a normal thing that happens in this market, and that's why our global recovery data is reflecting kind of inaccurately, because of course it's taking all different markets, and we're having this skewed data from what's going on in Paris. So I wanted to open up the floor. I know that we had seen, I had initially seen, I believe Tim from INREX might have been on the call, if he had any findings from data from his perspective. If he's not on the call or doesn't feel comfortable speaking, that's fine. I also thought if there's anybody else from parking and maybe transportation sectors, if they wanted to come and talk about if any of the data they're seeing in their own environments are also reflecting this similar sort of recovery trajectory.
Again, if you want to join the conversation, please use the participant menu, click the raise your hand feature, So that way we can identify who wants to speak, and then we will call on you.
Carmen, I don't see Kim at this time, so definitely open the floor to anybody who'd like to give their perspective, I would think.
Give it a few more seconds. Anybody's got good data, telling good stories?
Hey, Carmen,
David, I thought, yeah.
This is Dave Honorado. I know we're a small market compared to what you're comparing, but our mobile market is going up at a smaller rate, but it's going up in the right direction the last 6 weeks. The last 2 weeks also, the revenues increased are higher than just the meter revenues that are on the street too. So it seems like more people are adapting to the mobile system because we had a big concern and issue about getting away from cash at the meters in our garages and lots. So I think that's a trend why it's going up. But like you mentioned, I guess, or hit it at that, it's out of our control if the economy stays open in Pittsburgh or not, you know, as far as restaurants and bars. If it's stay-at-home order again, that'll affect us. But right now, we are seeing the right trend, and we're hoping and anticipating by December to be at only about 80 to 85% of where we were.
What do you think you're at right now in terms of percentage from any type of payment, not just mobile payments?
We're probably at about 22% of our revenues right now. We were down as low when we were at the low end of the pandemic.
And did you completely shut down enforcement or stop charging for parking?
We did shut down enforcement for about 9 weeks. Garages remained open, but once the streets became, they realized there was no enforcement, everyone vacated the garages and went to the streets. We resumed enforcement again on, I'm trying to remember, probably middle of June. And since then, we've been ramping back up. We're not at all enforcement, but we got meter enforcement, and we're not enforcing the residential permit areas, but everything else is being enforced.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks, Dave.
Mark Lyons wants to add to the conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hi, Mark.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. We saw a very quick rise at our beach district to almost 80% of our pre-COVID revenues. And in that area where the PayByPhone was low, it went up about 20 points. So I saw that as a real plus. In our downtown district, we were reaching 50 to 70% pre-COVID. That's still actually showing an increase, whereas the tourist-driven market is starting to flatten out. And then another piece that's impacting that, of course, is we're still sort of leaning lightly on enforcement, simply because demand is still low, and we certainly are hearing plenty from the merchants and the business associations about scaring people away. So I think some of that is starting to be resonating with people that are around here for a while, and the payments are starting to drop. But I also wanted to mention our downtown district, the PayByPhone system dramatically increased by about 50%. And so again, this is a positive sign for me from that sense.
Absolutely. Positive sign for me too, but I don't want to make this about mobile payments. So I'm going to try to scoot past the whole promotion of that side. Thanks, Mark. All right. So let's change. Yep.
Sorry to interrupt. Angel Diaz, I believe from Miami, would like to join the conversation too. Angel?
Hello.
Hello.
There we go.
A lot of familiar faces. Hope you're all doing well and staying safe. So our story in Miami is a little different. As you know, we are a heavy tourist-based city, so tourists are not really coming here right now. So we really see the effect of that. So our on-street revenue, although it's doing better, we're still at about 50% of what we were making pre-COVID. Our garages and our lots are still struggling. Can't really get, there's nobody that's coming downtown, so it's hard to fill the garages. A lot of our courts are still, working remotely or haven't opened yet. So a lot of the commercial business are still not open, or they're working remotely. So we don't have the monthly parkers that we usually had. So that has really hurt our off-street parking. And also to add to that, the daily parkers that used to come downtown in the garages also are just not there anymore. So our on-street has picked up a little bit, but it's still not, you know, where it used to be in the past. Thankfully, I mean, we have also not trying to plug PayByPhone, but the pandemic has actually helped push that, and we're kind of using that as a tool to tell people, hey, look, you can still park. You know, it's contactless. You use your app, and you don't have to touch any machine or anything like that. So we're doing that, and then we're also trying to implement some of those features in the off street in the garages. We're moving forward to contactless, you know, credit touchless payment in barcode scanners, things like that. So people don't actually have to push a button to pull a ticket. They can pay through their phone. The gate goes up. So we're investing money in that as well on the off street side to try to, you know, so people can understand that it's safe to park in the garages as well without having to put their hands on any type of equipment as well. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you. And that's actually a really nice segue into the next topic. Is there anybody else that wanted to talk on recovery examples? If not, I will move on.
You can move
So
on.
the next one thanks. The next one I wanted to talk about was universities. So we've kind of dealt with municipality sector and now university. Obviously, this time of year is generally when all of you on the phone that work in the university would be opening up campus and welcoming back students, staff, and faculty. And of course, this is going to look very different this year. Some of you, I imagine, are not opening up at all. Some of you are going to be doing just remote only for September, October, or doing some sort of hybrid approach. So my question was, what are your plans now that we're actually in it and we're not just thinking about fall semester, we're in it? And what are you doing to the technologies that you have on campus? So to Angel's point, what types of modifications or changes in programs, whether it's annual permits or the parks equipment that you have your vendors been providing options for you to turn it into a more contactless environment so that your parkers feel safe and secure? I was thinking we could start maybe with Josh, because I know he's got a lot of experience in that market, but also if there are any hardware vendors that are on the phone that just want to take a minute to talk about some of the creative things that they've come up with too, I'd love to hear. Josh, do you feel like sharing some? Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Carmen. I mean, our story at George Mason's probably pretty typical of what most universities are dealing with. You know, we're coming off where we refunded our students and employees for their permits over the spring and summer, but actually didn't make them turn their permits in. We stopped charging people that pay via payroll deduction. So as we gear up, we just started permit sales 2 days ago, and our permit sales are down about 70%. We actually made 2 significant changes to permits. First was we decided we're not going to sell annual permits. We're only going to sell semester permits because, I mean, while we don't even know what's going to happen for this fall, we certainly have no idea what's going to happen in spring, and didn't want to be caught in a situation where we sold an annual permit and then we go online at some point and then have to do massive refunds like we did this past spring. Like we refunded about $2.7 million of permits this last spring and summer. Also, another thing we did was, as we're looking at probably about a $5 million hit to our budget, and we're about a $20 million operation. We're looking for ways to save money. We decided actually to not order hang tag permits, and are just having people buy semester permits but print them out. And now it presents some issues because usually when we sell like temporary permits where people can buy them and print them out themselves, it's tied to a specific license plate, where normally with a hang tag permit, we allow people to move them back and forth. So we're trying to come up with a strategy that if they need to drive another car, they will need to come to our office to get a permit for the day. But overall, our numbers, like a lot of universities, those are way down. We're looking at, although half the classes will be online, only about 25% will physically be on campus because of the class sizes being reduced. So on a normal day, we would normally have 22,000 people at a given time parked on campus. We may have like 4,000 at most. And also with residential students being down, their population being down, I've been telling people it's almost like what we normally deal with in summer, but all year round. But the one advice I have, again, I think what we're doing is not much different than most. We've stripped down our shuttle operations. We're only running half of our routes. We actually are installing plastic or shields between the seats to allow us to actually go up to 50% seating capacity, where we were faced at looking at 25% seating capacity before. But one of the things I keep telling people is, students and employees are really, there's a lot of anxiety. And, while we're very big about, here are the rules and being consistent in enforcement, to really work with people and use, kid gloves on this, that, people are upset. They're upset that they're having to pay student fees and they don't have access to all the facilities on campus. Tuition, actually, we actually increased tuition. Our parking fees, luckily, did not go up. So one of the strategies we're trying to do is we're offering some new daily permit options. We see that a lot of folks that will be on campus are only going to be on campus once a week. So instead of committing to a semester permit or a monthly permit, it's cheaper just to buy a daily permit. However, on the flip side, though, when we did refunds, we let everybody keep their permits, but we told the people that going forward, if you want to get a refund or stop paying for parking, you're going to have to turn your permit in. But we're telling people you need to really think about how often you're going to really be on campus, because it actually works out where if you're on campus once a week, payroll deduction is actually still a better option than paying the daily rate. So a lot of it's just getting people to think about their new individualized situation. And a lot of it they don't know yet, but to say, don't commit too much, don't take it one day at a time. And, we're telling people, be lenient. If we have deadlines, let's be flexible. There are new things we've had to do. We used to have an early bird discount on people that paid tickets within 5 days. Well, we don't want people coming to the office. So we're working on a strategy where they could pay the ticket, but then email us and we'll do a refund on the back end. And since 99% of our transactions are online, it's pretty easy to do a refund via credit card. So it's just thinking about new ways. I told our staff at a meeting this morning is, even if it means a little extra work on our end, we need to make sure that we're still offering the same things for students and employees and being flexible. And again, we've cut our staff in about half. So I'm also telling people we're not going to be as responsive as we normally are, perhaps, to things. But on the other hand, we shouldn't just hide behind that as an excuse to not provide the services we do. So we're again, anxious to see what the daily permit options and the daily sales are going to be. And again, there's just a lot of anxiety with people. And I said, that's the number one thing is, we're a service, one of many services, and just trying to be reassuring and be a friendly face in the midst of all the anxiety people are dealing with.
So if you had a crystal ball in front of you, when do you think your operation is going to be 90, 100% back to normal?
I see almost no chance of it this academic year. I mean, honestly, we've been having discussions about long-term planning and master planning, and we had a large discussion. We had a consultant come in and we did like a 10-year study, and part of the discussion was what we put together in January pre-COVID. Can you really rely on that? Do we really have any confidence that in FY22, FY23, we're going to be back to normal? Is it going to be only 60% of normal? Obviously for universities, the academic plan drives what we're going to wind up doing, but it's hard to see universities going back and not offering hybrid classes. If people, it's just like employees in teleworking. It's hard to see that people are going to go back and say, no, you can't telework anymore when there's so many savings to be had. So, if the university can grow enrollment by offering more hybrid classes, that unfortunately maybe for a business like ours means less people, but I think that's the reality. And I'm saying for future planning, like we're saying maybe 60 to 70% by 2022, 2023. And I'm not even confident in those numbers personally.
Wow. So it seems like in the university sector anyways, the recovery is going to be longer and slower than municipal, most likely.
Yeah.
If I was rubbing my crystal ball.
It is hard because, just like a municipal operation or anything, we're self-funded for the most part. And, while we can find savings, like for instance, you don't want to cut your maintenance project budget back too much, but at some point that's an easy target, right? In the short term to cut, I cut $1.5 million out of my maintenance budget after I got done my summer paving projects, So it's like those are things I don't want to do long term. But on the other hand, also is sometimes we have nice healthy reserves that we've been using to save up for perhaps a future garage, paying off debt service. When the university is losing $150 million, they're going to be like, I need your $5 million. I need your $10 million. So internally, it's kind of a fight and a struggle to, make sure that we're still financially solvent and, that the rest of the university doesn't strip us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anybody else have anything to say from the university perspective and or from changes and modifications to their technology to adapt?
Hey, Carmen, this is Brett Wood with Wood Solutions Group. I just wanted to weigh in on a couple things Josh said and then give you some perspective from some of the industry work that Rachel and I have been doing with IPMI. It's intriguing. We've looked at a lot of data over the past few weeks. We did a survey with IPMI. A lot of you took the survey, so thank you very much. And we've broken things down by sector. And the municipal data that you all talked about, 5 minutes ago, it's the same as what we're seeing. We're starting to see recovery. It's starting to speed up a little bit. It is definitely in tune with communities being reopened and the ability to capture daily and transient parking revenue, which is, I think, one of the weaknesses in the university system right now from being able to fully recover. So many universities are dependent on that July payday when they sell parking permits. And I've talked to a number of universities over the past couple of weeks, some of which are at a fraction of those permits sold from previous years, some of which are seeing permits sold at the same pace as they were before. And the rhyme or reason for that really has to do with the local economy and people kind of coming back and the confidence and coming back to campus. But to Josh's point, I think it's intriguing, the idea of like the hybrid campus going forward in the future. And where we begin to think about planning and investments going forward. Josh mentioned having money set aside for parking garages. I think now is the time as a director at a university to think, perhaps we put that on hold for a little bit and let's see what this hybrid thing looks like. Let's make sure that we actually have a need for it, because if we have students that are taking half of their classes from their dorm and then the other half they're taking in person, and we have staff that are now working from home, all of these projections that we consultants have made for you about the need to build thousands of spaces are out the window. But that's a potential cost savings and somewhere that you can think about perhaps finding ways to spread that money around to help the efficiency of the program. Some of the other things we saw from the survey that I thought were intriguing, the majority of respondents that were truly impacted by the revenue losses all were due to the refunding of permits. So there were certain schools that didn't refund permits, or they refunded at a prorated amount, and their economic impact was obviously less steep. But they've also set the stage so that if they have to do it again in the fall, they've got the ability to go with a prorated refund versus a full refund. So if you have to deal with this again in the fall, there's some benefit to going back to your constituents and saying, we're only going to give you half back because you got half a semester or something to that effect, and recovering some of that revenue. Others that saw less of a revenue hit were those that have begun to move to the daily parking model. So Josh talked about kind of a flexible parking model, daily permits or hourly parking. Those that have already moved into that model, they saw a hit for a month or so at the end of the semester, but for the most part, those folks are already transitioned from permit-based to daily-based or pay-as-you-go based. And so something to think about moving forward, both from a flexibility standpoint and a revenue generation on an ongoing basis. As a university, now may be the time to think about implementing more hourly parking or pay-as-you-go parking as a revenue strategy.
Agreed. Thank you.
Hey,
Any other commentary?
Carmen, Gary Means wants to chime in here. Gary, go ahead.
Of course.
Certainly not coming from the university perspective, but Josh mentioned, and Brett kind of played on it a little too, just capital programs and capital asset management. It is, for two reasons, we found a good time to push forward with repair type work. You have the capacity because we're down so much. Our facilities are sitting around 36% occupied, where we were in the 90s prior to this. of occupancy. And then secondly, pricing. And there may be some of our consultant friends on the call here, but construction folks, from what I understand, from what I'm hearing around the industry, is new construction is about similar costs and sometimes more just because of challenges of shipping right now. But restoration work, you're getting some really good pricing. And we found that out in a smaller project that we bid out. And then we said, well, why don't we take a look at what we had projected in 2022 or 2021-22 year and pull that into this year. So rather than bidding out $1 million worth of work, we bid out what we thought would be $2 million worth of work. And our bids, we haven't selected it yet, so it's probably not the smartest thing for a meany person to be saying, but somewhere between $1 million and $1.2 million right now is what we're getting on what we thought was $2 million worth of work. So just something to take in consideration, those two pieces.
Thanks, Gary. We have a topic about what positive is coming out of COVID that I'm hoping we can do at the end. And so there's a foray into that. I think, Dave, you raised your hand again.
I would just follow up on what Gary and Brett were saying, that we were in the middle of a complete rebuild of a garage. And timing-wise, we were fortunate. We got the demo done. But to your point, Brett, we did put the new construction on hold. We didn't issue RFP. And we'll evaluate it once we're back into the 90% revenues. It may turn out that we don't need that facility now, even though it's in the heart of our downtown area, because we're at, like Gary noted, we're at about 30% capacity if we're there yet. But we won't make that decision until our revenues are up or utilization climbs back up. It may be that we don't need that facility now.
Anybody else on this particular topic? If
ahead,
not,
Yeah.
we...
The other message I was going to say is, and I think this applies to regardless of what sector you are in parking, that with some of these reduced numbers, it's actually somewhat of a good time to try new programs and new options. And, you know, it's a lot easier to try a new pricing program when you're only selling to 4,000 people versus 25,000 people. So, you know, being creative and trying new ways, you know, I think people are, as far as much as trouble they may have as far as reading signs and following our rules, they're actually pretty quick to pick up on options that work for them that make economic and financial sense. So, you know, I think it's a golden opportunity under the guise of COVID to try some new programs and see what works. If something doesn't work, you could say, oh, well, yeah, it's COVID and we're going to go back to normal or whatever. But, you know, I say, you know, be creative and try new things.
Which perfectly tees up my next topic. You guys just keep helping me walk right into it. First off, I didn't realize how much airplane traffic I have here, so I'm going to keep muting myself when I can hear them going overhead, so I apologize. So there's been chatter for years and years and years about curb management. This is nothing new. We've all been dealing with the variety of additional stakeholders that want the front and the back of the curb. Again, we're not going to necessarily launch into that. But what I've noticed, especially in the IPMI forum lately, is how can we expedite this? So we're looking at more and more increased timelines to create these new programs and to have adapted uses. And for example, in Vancouver, where I live, we've been doing this for years. Initially, it started as more of a sustainability initiative. We did something called summer spaces, where we took away a lot of street space, a lot of parking, to create environments where we were bringing more people in, having social time, cutting down on car traffic. Of course, that was the sustainable part of it. We were doing badminton in streets. We had dancing lessons. Of course, there's the restaurants and food carts and those types of things. But I've seen in the chat is like, this is now needing to be expedited. But the problem is that there's still policies that need to be changed, applications that need to go in, a lot of planning that has to happen. Gary, I know you had given some advice, and I'd love to hear from you in a second. But City of Durango, Wade from Durango posted today, and I'm not sure if everyone had the chance to read that, but he was kind of highlighting all of the challenges and all of the stakeholders that need to be involved. And it was somewhat overwhelming to do it in a really tight time frame between the applications, putting in your planning. Sometimes it's city that needs to then restripe. In his case, I think it was even state that had to re-sign and change the flow of traffic and streetlights. And I don't know. I have never worked for a government, but I have certainly sold to governments, and they don't move quickly. So how are we able to expedite this, curb management that we've been talking about for years, but to actually make it happen and effective right now during this pandemic? So Gary, maybe we could start off with you because you had some advice, and then if anybody else has some examples, we could talk about.
Sure, and I'm glad you brought up the forum because it's such a great place to keep this conversation going. And I did notice that reply today was regarding state roads coming through. So I had a quick little thought on that, but I'll get back to what you're really driving at. Our city has worked an arrangement out with the state of Kentucky. So when state roads come through, our city took over the maintenance, and that gives a lot of local. So they kind of swapped out roads. So we'll take over maintenance of this, but you take over that. And they just kind of swapped out the authority. And then that gives you a lot more local play on what to do with streets and street configuration that were formerly state roads. So that's stuff that takes a long time to happen. That would be my reply to that one earlier. In terms of stakeholders, and then I'll talk to myself at first. I think a lot of times, a lot of us that are truly like in that mindset of being a parking professional, we hate free, we hate giving up stuff. But I think in the whole curb line management discussion, we've all started to have to open up our mind a little bit about what the future might look like. And so this is sort of jumping that into a fast movement and a fast mode. And I think at the same time, certain city councils are learning to make they're pulling meetings together, say, let's create a permit for seating in the public right of way where maybe they didn't have one before. So sometimes that's happening at the council level, and they're figuring out how to move faster. But for us, it is that realization that if we really are down to 30% or even 50%, I know some cities, Miami's seeing some more movement in their downtown core at meters. Can't remember what Angel said earlier, but we have the capacity, we have the space to try something. And so I always try to, and I threw it out in that, try to do a pilot so that you're not saying, hey, it's going to be free forever. Try to think about a balanced approach. How can it be a win-win? How can we get a little bit and you get a little bit? If the restaurants really need some help, let's figure out a way to help them. So being not a blocker of these things, I think is really important for all of us parking professionals. And then, our stakeholder team, when we're reviewing permits for, say, seating areas in the public right-of-way, it's made up of police, fire, mayor's office. It's the whole gamut. Even though the parking authority is not even a department of the city, at least we have a seat at the table and are able to really put in our voice. So that's kind of how we get through it. And really, my advice is just to, try to make yourself available, come up with ideas. Certainly don't. You don't want to give away the farm, but you don't want to be the person digging in their heels and saying, well, we never did it like that, or that's going to kill us. Because reality, we're all kind of getting killed right now. So let's figure out a way to, help benefit some people. And then maybe at some point when things pick back up, or another thing about metered spaces, yeah, you might give up these two, but if somebody who was going to park there, probably parking in another empty one just a couple of spaces down or around the block, so you probably didn't lose any business in doing something like these things. I don't know if that got at what you needed, Carmen, but.
Yeah, well, I was thinking like what Josh was saying about this is actually a really good time to pilot some different things and get creative, and you don't have to commit. This is an opportunity to try. I was thinking that can perhaps expedite this type of thing, and whether the adaptive use of the curb continues the way that you frame it now, who knows? That's why it's kind of trial and pilot. So thank you. That was exactly what I was looking for. Anybody else have any creative ways that they're using space or having requests to use space? Richard.
Thank you, Carmen. Can you guys hear me? Because I've got this earpiece on. Okay, great. So just wanted to follow up on something Gary just said, which was, I guess, in this situation, with respect to curbside, the idea of the stakeholders, of course, has always been the case. And Carmen, we just this past year put together a workshop for curbside there in Vancouver, part of ITS Canada, and then in Montreal, and then we were going to do it in Calgary, but the meeting was canceled because of the COVID. But I noticed here, since I can tell you things that are happening in overseas and all across the country, just because I have to travel. There's been no travel. So the only thing I can tell you about right now is what I've seen in DC. And it's been really interesting. It's a lot of opportunities have come up as a result of COVID with respect to curbside management. And so like Adam's working, the restaurants basically they extended out into the roadway where they're using what they call Jersey barriers and different things to separate traffic from the table. So you have 2 lanes going each direction. Now you have 1 lane going in each direction, right? Which is really nice, lots of pedestrians, great. However, the stakeholder piece comes into play. Whether it's COVID or not, the stakeholder piece is really important. And what we've learned of going across Canada and across the US is, of course, you really have to consider the freight deliveries, right? So if you're starting to use up that curb space and sidewalks for more pedestrian activities in the restaurants and much more outdoor activities, you still have the freight that needs to be delivered. I think everybody on the line here, I think, knows that, but you also have to deal with food deliveries. And when you talk freight delivery, I got to have my Big Mac and I got to have it at 11. It needs to be there. And that's not a truck, right? That's a car that pulls up, drops my Big Mac off. So that has to take place. And a lot of that is taking place. So we know that. So we close off streets and curbside, but we still have to make those types of deliveries. But also what a lot of people aren't thinking about is there are places across the country where we have car share spaces, right? So where we park those vehicles and we can go pick them up, where there are EV sites, right? Electric vehicle charging sites, where you can't get to those anymore if you're starting taking up that space. And so, hey, I didn't really think about that. And bike share spaces, some places are on the curb, some places are actually taking sidewalks and taking them on the curb and the street. So we still have to think about that. And something that's often overlooked that I want everybody here to think about and really open my eyes on the workshop in Vancouver on talks to curbside and stakeholders. Or we put some neat things out on the sidewalk. We put tables outside so we have some space, because we can only have so many in the restaurant, but we put some more outside, and that's fantastic. But we don't think about, and this is not just COVID, those that are blind, right? So we've got folks that are blind that are walking down the sidewalks, and now we have these tables and chairs. And look, there's been a pact. Okay, I can't see, but that's okay because I know where I'm going. And everything's great, and you can, and we have this understanding between the government, the folks that manage the sidewalks, and me. They make sure I have clear space. I know what my clear space is. No problems. Now all of a sudden you're starting to put stuff out there. You put nice signs. Come over, have a table over here. We got the specials for the day, and all these types of things that are taking place. Not to mention, okay, so maybe I'm not blind, but I'm in a wheelchair. I can't get through that anymore. I can't even get to my car anymore because the sidewalk is blocking the street because they have all these types of things. That goes back to the stakeholders, that there are opportunities here to do some great things, but there's some opportunities to do some really bad things. And if you think about, well, let's see how many blind people are out there. Well, how many blind people does it take to fall down, bust their jaw, but take the teeth out of their mouth, and then sue you? How much money are we talking about that? So now all of a sudden that one person that's blind, there's certainly not more than that we really have to pay attention to. Now, we could do that now, or we could do that in the courtroom. I suggest you do that now. But those are just some of the things that we really need to start thinking about on these curbside opportunities that are out there without having our stakeholders, all of them. Most of us don't think about all the stakeholders. We have a list, a laundry list, but that list is by no means, I don't know how many of you have pulled the blind in for curbside management issues, for example, or the disabled, but they're there too. So I just want to make sure we keep that in mind. Thanks, Carmen.
Yeah, and that perfectly highlights the fact that you have to take into account both sides of the curb, the front and the back. It's not just the parking or the driving right of way. It's, the pedestrian access and storefronts and all of that. So thanks, Richard. That was perfect. Time is flying. What I would like to do right now to wake everybody up is launch a poll. I've never launched a poll in a Zoom format before, so we're going to see if it works or not. There's 5 questions. I would love participation. Not really sure how we're going to see the results, so trial and error for all of us. And then I have 2 more topics I'd love for us to address for the last few minutes, but they're a little bit more fun, maybe not quite so parking intensive. So let's see if this works. Can I get a thumbs up or a yes if people can see the polls? Okay, perfect. All right, I'll give maybe 20, 30 seconds for us to do this. I've been told that you can just launch to the next question when you answer one, and so on and so forth. Hopefully that's what's actually happening. Give a few more seconds. I'm seeing some results. This is good. We have a nice blend, a little bit stronger on the municipal representation, but pretty good between all markets.
So we're clear,
A
Carmen.
few more seconds and then we'll.
So we're
Yep.
clear, Carmen. I see on this poll, all I'm doing is just scrolling down and answering the questions. I haven't submitted anything. So you're seeing actually responses.
I'm seeing all of your results. That's correct. And in about 5 seconds, I'm going to say end polling and it's going to disappear and we'll have the results that we can share. All right, so I will end it now and we'll see what happens. I'm going to share the results and let's see what happens. Here we go. All right, so a little bit stronger on the municipal side representation. Looks like most people are going to be dividing work time between home and office. We were talking about that a few minutes ago, just in what's the commuter traffic going to be like and parking requirements for employees. Increasing work from home hours, not surprising. Oh, 2021 or beyond for full recovery. Will only travel in my country. The planet was a bit of a joke. We're not quite at the point where we can travel outside of our planet yet. But, all right, thanks for participating in that. Some of them might come into relevance for the last two topics. So the last two topics for the 10 minutes I wanted to talk about are just creative things that you're seeing in your city or your environment about how you're moving people, how you're socializing people, how you're being able to sort of get back into some sense of normalcy and or any sort of creative ways that people are getting around contactless. So again, it doesn't have to be parking. So I'll launch with a couple of examples that I've seen. One of them, a few of you know from another conversation, but Vancouver is launching an outdoor floating cinema this summer. So it's in September. It's going to be 24 8-person boats that will launch into the water. Vancouver's obviously a coastal city. There's a very large screen that will be showing some new release movies and some golden oldies. Popcorn comes in the boat, and then there'll be an option to purchase before you board the boat with different, snack items. Now, the challenge is, what if I need to use the restroom halfway through the movie? I'm not sure what the solution is going to be to that. But what I did immediately upon seeing this was I signed up. I've technically bought a boat because you have to buy the 8 seats. The problem is they haven't released the cost, so I have no idea what I've bought. I hope I'll have a chance to opt out if it's something like $100 a person or something. But anyways, I thought that was kind of fun, a little creative way of getting people out in hopefully a socially distanced and safe manner. The other thing that I've seen is Walmart specifically and some other big box store brands opening up their parking lots. All seem to be around movies, but also doing movie viewings and having little, car side movie snack kits that they can purchase. So I don't know if any of those are happening in your cities. This one other thing has nothing to do with right now. It's just something in the city of Berkeley, and it's very old and historical, but in the parking office in the city of Berkeley, you don't have to press the buttons on the elevator. They're actually little kick buttons down at the bottom. So you can kick a button to call the elevator, and then you can kick a button to which floor you want to go in. And I thought, how genius that probably 50 years ago, something completely contactless was created, then removed, and maybe we'll see a resurgence. I don't know. So open up to the floor, anything creative that you're seeing or fun that we can talk about for the last few minutes.
Diana, do you want to go?
Yeah, thanks. This is Diana Alarcon from the city of Tucson. One of the things that we're actually pushing forward is slow streets. That was an initiative that many cities are doing, but we started it and we are going to continue with it. We found it as a great tool to what we're calling use the streets to extend everybody's front porch. And many of our neighborhoods testing it in many neighborhoods of slowing the cars down or almost to some point allowing for more activity to happen. We get soccer games going out there. We had a front porch concert that allowed everyone to social distance. So that's been a very popular practice that we've had in our city, and we just actually expanded that to where we're now doing more than what we were before, so we're excited about that. We also have drive-in movies. We're in the desert, but we have a couple of our parking lots that we've turned into drive-in theaters. So you buy your ticket by car and you drive in, they stage you properly, socially distancing you, and you get to see a movie. And we're doing new ones as well as oldies but goodies as well. I actually got to see Breakfast at Tiffany, and it was a ton of fun. I took my kids and put the top down, and popcorn and everything, and we had a blast. And I have two older, they aren't kids, they're older sons, they're in college, and I had my niece with me who's younger, and they'd never seen, Breakfast at Tiffany, so it was quite a big deal to share Audrey Hepburn with them and all of that. So those are some of the great things. And then from, because we have transportation as well as parking. We're seeing, because there's not as much congestion on the roadway, we're seeing a lot of speeding. So we've also enacted what we're calling not only slow streets, but slow down. So we've been working with different neighborhoods on yard signs to go up actually throughout the community to put signs up saying, hey, we live here, slow down, to try to kick that campaign forward so that people will remember, even though you may have more open space and you can move a little bit quicker, you should not, because somebody lives and they're extending their front door. So we've got some really innovative, fun things that we've been doing in Tucson that's had a really popular outcome. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Thanks, Diana. That's awesome. I want to see those pictures of the movie up on Facebook. I've been tracking some of your time spent with your kids lately, but I didn't see that one.
Yeah, I will actually put it up because I took the picture with the sunset in the background. It was absolutely magnificent. Nice. So I will put that on Facebook and share with everybody. Thanks.
I think Dave raised his hand, and then Richard, I can see you've raised your hand, maybe in that order. Dave, you're muted. Oh, there you go. We're good now.
We also, Pittsburgh has the floating movies in September on the rivers. But unlike you, I did not buy my ticket. So you can know how they go for next time around in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Richard?
I wanted to share with you guys, I don't know if anyone here gets the Smart Cities Dive kind of newsletter, but there was an article there that caught my eye, and it had to do with, because we do a lot of work in the transit arena also, but it had to do with tuk-tuks. And those of you that have been overseas, certainly in Asia and other parts, you know what tuk-tuks are. And the resurgence during COVID, and this could impact our parking in our universities as far as shuttles are concerned, because they're basically almost, well, it's kind of hard to describe a tuk-tuk to you, but they're open air, and you get in the back, and there's maybe 2 seats in the back, or 3 seats, or 6 seats, and you have a driver up front, and it's open air to go from point A to point B for places that you don't want to take a bicycle or use the e-scooters, but it's a little further than that. And they're recognizing and mentioned, because of transit being a closed vehicle and these being open vehicles, that those are starting to see there's a resurgence in them in their electric vehicles. So when you're thinking about moving students around a campus, or you have to deal with transit in your region and you're part of at the table, that may come up soon. The use of these types of vehicles that are open air, much safer as far as recirculating air in COVID virus type of environment. Just want to share that.
So I've had opportunity to be on a tuk-tuk a few times. Yeah, that's a very modern example. If you're over in Southeast Asia, they don't look like that. So the only problem I see is that how I've used a tuk-tuk, where maybe 2 people are supposed to go in, we'll cram 5 or 6. And so now all of a sudden you're like face to face with the person you're with. But yeah, that is a super creative idea of how we can move people in an open air type of environment. Those of you that have not had opportunity to be on a tuk-tuk, take one if you can get it. They're a ton of fun. Still open for any other suggestions there. In the last 3 or 4 minutes, I thought we could also throw out just any positive, feel-good stories, things that are good that have come out of COVID, because we tend to really talk about all of the bad things that are happening, but there has to be some good. And so a couple of things that I've thought about is the fact that although I haven't seen many of you in person this entire year, which is very sad, I've seen you far more than I would have ever had opportunity to, because we're turning our cameras on now. And so somebody said this slogan a while ago that we're touchless, but we're not faceless. And I hope some of that continues, because it's, you know, we're going to do business in a different manner moving forward. It's not going to go back to the same that it was. I think we can all agree to that. So if we can incorporate more of this face-to-face, virtual face-to-face, it's nice. And what that does is I think it brings out the humanity in us. We are more accepting of people's families, children, pets, home life, different scenarios that we're in. And I think it's making us all more accepting of each other. And obviously we've had a lot of heavy topics come out in world events with diversity and inclusion, and that's driving it as well. But not to get too heavy, the one really good thing in Vancouver is that our liquor laws are loosening. So we're able to drink now in certain parks. Nathan and I sometimes will pour a drink into a glass and walk around the neighborhood, and we've driven past police officers or walked past police officers a few times, and they're just like, hey guys, we're like, hey, this is cool. It's like New Orleans. Anyways, I'll stop talking the last few minutes. I'd love some feel-good stories from everybody here.
All right, we have time for one comment before we go. So who's the lucky person?
Hey, in Texas, we have a similar thing where you can pick up cocktails from your restaurants. We couldn't do that before. So now you can get cocktails to go. And that like takes
yep.
the burden off of having to make cocktails yourself. It's amazing. You get good stuff.
All right, well, that concludes everything today. I want to thank everyone who participated, and a special thank you to Carmen for today's conversation. This concludes today's Shop Talk. So what I'd like to do is invite everybody to join us to continue the conversation on the forum. You can go to forum.parking-mobility.org. If you need help, need assistance logging in, please reach out to Kim Fernandez. She's happy to help you get logged in and join the conversation. Also, I want to remind everyone that our next Shop Talk is going to be on August 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We are going to do a fireside chat on industry inclusion, which is going to be moderated by Gary Means. Richard Easley is going to be joining us along with Kim Jackson, Tiffany Smith, and Keith Hutchinson. So please mark your calendars and register for the session. And before the fireside chat, I do want to bring up our upcoming webinar. It's on August 12th. Brett Wood is going to discuss considering an alternative to adaptive reuse, which is going to be on the 12th at 2 p.m. We are offering a special right now. You get the last 5 webinars of the year, which is August through December, for the low rate of $99. That's less than $20 per webinar. So once you register, you have a seat for all of those. You can join us live, or you can join us through the archived version once it's made available. And finally, we do still have our Stay Connected resource page available still. So please go visit the page. The page is right there on the site. So then that way you can see any of the new content that we have up there. And then on October 6th, 7th, and 8th, we are having our virtual IPMI Leadership Summit. So we invite you to join us there. It's $79 for all IPMI members, or you can bring a 5-member team for $199. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. This Shop Talk is copyrighted in 2020 by the International Parking and Mobility Institute with all rights reserved. You may now disconnect. Thank you.
Thank you.